Why, hello everybody, this is Gregsynthbootlegs, and when you're looking at this video, you may be thinking, I've never seen anything like this before on this channel at all. It looks new. What are you doing? What can we expect? Well, those are all valid questions, and you guys are absolutely right. This is the very first time in the history of me being on YouTube that I've ever used TierMaker. Um, And it was an idea I had a while back, and I've said it multiple times where I really want to just rank gigs and go through the tour legs and use TierMaker and kind of make a series using those ideas. So, what I've decided to do is every time I'm done uploading a tour leg, whether it be something that's relatively short or something that's long and has a lot of gigs, I'm going to make a TierMaker video on that leg. Um, as for doing a whole tour, it really depends on the length, and sometimes there's only a certain amount of recordings, so I may bend the rules here and there. But for the most part, I'm going to stick with uh, tour legs, and I may combine some if there's not enough recordings, but we'll see how it goes. So, since I'll be uploading all the shows chronologically for the most part, I'm going to make a TierMaker video for Queen's 1973 gigs, being the London broadcast soundboard up to Bristol. So, we're going to have 7 gigs on here, and you can see my cursor right here. Right down here are the gigs. The 7 gigs. You see London, you see Liverpool, Oxford, Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, and Bristol. Um, and this is my first time doing this sort of video. Things may change slightly. I'm not sure, but I know that it's going to generally follow the same format. And since there's only going to be 7 gigs during this year that I'll have to go through, this will give me time to sort of explain everything in a little bit more detail on this first video compared to some of the other ones that I'll be doing. So, right over here, there are 7 rankings. You have SS, S, A, B, C, D, and E. Now, it's pretty obvious what those mean just by looking at them. Obviously, SS, best, E, worst. I've seen some people do tier makers with similar subjects where they only have, 4 tiers or maybe 5. And it's usually separated like A through E or S, A, B, C, D, or something similar to that. And that's okay. That's perfectly valid. But the reason why I stretch it to 7 tiers for this, and every tier maker video will have these 7 rankings. The reason why I'm doing 7 is this allows for a little bit more wiggle room and less of a chance of those gigs where you're kind of hovering in between rankings. So this kind of gives you a little bit more wiggle room, and it sort of allows you to give better explanations, at least to me, on the gigs. So instead of cramming everything on A, if there's only 4 or 5 tiers, I can maybe divide them up a bit better, explain them a bit better, and trying to give the best results I can. So that's essentially what this goal is. Each tour leg will have the gigs right down in this general area right here, and I will click and drag them into the appropriate tier. And I'll kind of go through what these tiers mean and give you an explanation for each one. Starting with up here, SS. SS are the granddaddy of all gigs. They're the ultimate gigs. They are essentially flawless or nearly flawless. They're kind of those gigs where it's like they're perfect, everything is top notch. Like the musicianship is going to be absolutely outstanding, beyond the norm. Just so many great things happening. These gigs will have like amazing atmosphere, amazing vocals, just every all around just these are perfect gigs or near perfect gigs, or like when you listen to these gigs, you're like, it can't get any better than this. Ultimate. And not many gigs will go up here. Once in a while, one may pop up, but very rarely, in regards to all the recordings, will you see SS filled up. Then you go to S. S gigs are almost up there. They're amazing gigs. They're full of great performances. There's some outstanding stuff on them. Just all around excellence again, but what would separate an S from an SS would be just the SS gigs will be just a little bit better. Just like it has that little extra oomph behind them, a little extra spice, maybe a bit more gutsiness, maybe a bit more spirited renditions of stuff. But an S gig is generally very, very high quality. They can be considered some of the best stuff out there as well. Generally, the lines will be kind of blurred between these two. And it's going to come down to really listening to these and kind of just going through them with a fine-tooth comb and seeing where they go. I can tell that S gigs are not that they're going to be extremely common, but you will see them pop up. I mean, they're not going to be probably on every single tour, but it's not rare. I mean, you'll see them. And then we go to A. A is, okay, these gigs are very good. There's some great stuff on them. Still very consistent. These are generally, this is good. Very solid overall. These gigs will still have moments of brilliance on them. Still may have like a performance or two of like either the best or up with the best. But what would separate this right here from these would be usually maybe a bit more in terms of sloppiness, maybe a little bit more spotty, maybe a slight roller coaster effect on performances where the consistency, albeit still great, may not be up to this level up here. But there's no shame in A for a ranking. A is generally high quality, very good, borderline excellent, nothing to be ashamed of with an A. And a lot of gigs most likely will be up here as well. So this will be probably a fairly common ranking. Then we get to B. B is solid. Not necessarily amazing, but they're good. They're solid. There's some good stuff, but just not nearly as consistent as the previous three rankings. On this one, you may see stuff where maybe Freddie is having a bit of a rough night in some areas, but maybe the musicianship is, eclipsing that, or it could be, the band is a little off in some spots, but still generally good. Or it could be gigs where, it's solid, but there's nothing really just particularly outstanding on them. It's not necessarily average, but a little bit above average. Just solid all around. This would be probably a very common ranking as well. So, B is still, pretty good. Nothing really wrong with that. Just, it's not top notch. Now we get to C. Now C is now starting to get into the, like the average territory. These gigs tend to be fair. They're all right. They're decent. But really nothing stands out on these ones, really. These gigs will kind of be like ones where, completionist's sake, it's there on the tour. Nothing stands out at all. I mean, it'll have some moments here and there, but consistency would often be an issue at C. There's a little bit of the hills and valleys on B, but it's going to be more obvious on C. These gigs generally have moments where there's like, ooh, or there's rough stuff going on, or maybe the band's having a little bit of an off night, or Freddie isn't doing too hot. But they're not terrible gigs. But they can be decent. They can have some redeeming qualities, but generally these will be basically stuff that's like meh, okay, nothing really stands out. You will find C gigs, throughout Queen's career. Maybe not quite as common as B or maybe A, but C gigs do exist. Now we get to D. D, basically mediocre. Nothing stands out really in a good way on these recordings. Maybe the band is just kind of going through the motions. Freddie may not be sounding good. Nothing really noteworthy. What would keep these gigs from being E is if they're not as bad as E, basically. They're mediocre, definitely for completionists. It may have like something here or there that will give you like a raised eyebrow or a round of applause, or that was good, or maybe some wild card moments. But generally, these gigs aren't exactly the best. But to be honest with Queen, you may not see a lot of D gigs because there's not very many gigs I can name off the top of my head where it goes into this territory in comparison to some of the ones in the middle tier. So D gigs will not be too common in comparison to some of the other ones, but they're generally mediocre, not very good overall. But the only redeeming qualities would be that it's not as bad as this tier, E, which is essentially poor, bad. Really, you don't want to listen to these unless you're forced to listen to them, or you want to listen to them just to hear what's wrong or something. E is basically gigs where either the band are just not into it at all, they're marred by errors, poor, singing, poor playing, maybe bad atmosphere, but there's something that drags gigs to here. Like there has to be something on from the outside that would do it. Maybe the ingredients weren't baked properly, but generally they're going to be pretty similar to D except worse. But very rarely are there going to be gigs going down into here. So essentially, it's going to be rare to find gigs that are here at SS or E. Not common at all for D. Somewhat the same for S. Most of the gigs are probably going to fall in this area right here. A, B, and to an extent C. So that's essentially kind of a rundown of what these tier letters mean. And without wasting any more time with explanations, let's get into the 73 shows. Now, to quickly recap, as I said earlier, every time I upload everything on a specific tour leg or a year, depending on what's available, I will do a video like this. And we have 7 gigs to go through for 73, so let's do it. And my quick take on the 73 stuff is I love it. I love the youthful energy. I love the enthusiasm and the rawness on these performances. The amazing musicianship, especially by Brian and Roger. They just sound so hungry on these early gigs, just ready to take over the world. They play amazingly, and what they lack in, say, polishedness, they make up for raw energy and effort. And I love the 73 stuff. I hope more stuff gets released. So yeah, I dig 73. Can't really say anything bad about it. An awesome tour leg, at least for me. So we'll start with London 73, the Golders Green show, the soundboard broadcast hybrid that's out there. Amazing quality. I am going to put it right at A. I think it's a great show. The quality is amazing. You can really hear the prowess of the band. Roger is an animal. Brian's guitar tones rarely sounded better. It's a raw sound. I love it. Freddie sounds so young, but he sounds so spirited, and Deacon's bass is amazing, and it's great. I love that show. The quality certainly helps. It's a solid A. It's very good, and I'm praising it a lot, but I'm only giving it A. That's because there are better shows on this era, I should say. Now for Liverpool, Liverpool is kind of a tough one because it has moments where it's better than London and more solid. So you'd think you'd put it at S, but I still think the band are just a little bit behind S tier. I would put it between an A and an S, so it would be an ass gig. But I'll keep it at A. But I will say that it's a more solid A. I would probably put it. Yeah, I would put it between the two, but I'm gonna keep it at A because I think the ingredients are there and the bands sound fantastic. Ogre Battle is phenomenal and great musicianship, and I just think later on they get even better. So that's why I keep it at A. But there's no shame in having Liverpool at A because it's still very consistent. Oxford. This one I think can sneak to S. I think Oxford has an edge over the previous two. The playing is even more spirited. You have Brian going bonkers on the songs. You have a very good Liar rendition. The sound check is fun. And it's essentially a tighter gig in comparison to the other two. Not necessarily because there's less mistakes, but it's just they're more cued in, and it's got a little bit more of everything that these two gigs have. And I think Oxford just about makes the S. It's an awesome show. I really, really love it. It's one of my favorites for 73. Glasgow. This gig. S without a question. Despite it being cut and missing a song, and the quality not being exactly what you would call amazing because it's a bit overblown, this gig is absolutely awesome. Raw. Freddie sounds so good on this show for 73. He pushes his voice to higher limits. It's got one of the best versions of Liar out there. The I'm a Man performance with Big Spender beginning it sounds amazing. And Keep Yourself Alive is so gutsy. Basically, everybody is just on fire this whole gig. I love it. This is one of the best early recordings you can hear of Queen in terms of the performances. It's just this is what makes the 73 tour just really special. The rawness, the hungry band, and the willingness to just be gutsy on these performances and play their asses off. So Glasgow is right there at S. Manchester. This one is kind of a tough one because I think some things are better at Manchester compared to Glasgow. Other times it's a little bit less impressive in some aspects to Glasgow, but it's still very, very high quality. But I'm gonna lean towards S on this one because I think the band are just top notch. It's the one truly complete recording from the tour. I know Bristol is mostly complete, but you got the cut on Liar, and Procession is cut a little bit. But Manchester has an extremely aggressive band. They play their asses off. It sounds amazing. The solos, in particular from Brian, are absolutely amazing. Freddie is still very strong, albeit not quite as Glasgowian, I should say. But it still has a lot of the elements to make this an S gig. I absolutely love it. Manchester is a great show. and very, very consistent, and I truly love it. Birmingham. This one's going to be slightly controversial, but it has the ingredients to be S. But we're missing a decent chunk of the show to really truly give it its proper ranking. So I'm going to slip it to A. But I want to put an asterisk by this ranking because I think the show has the ingredients to be S, but since we don't have quite a bit of the recording, it's really hard to make a judgment, and I don't want to assume anything because if I do and something comes out that contradicts what I'm thinking, then I kind of look dumb. So I'm going to keep it at A just because I think what we have is brilliant, and it's some of the best playing you'll hear from Brian and Roger in particular on this tour. But it's just not really complete enough for me to throw it up at S, but I will say that this has the potential to be an S if we have more. So that leads to the last gig, Bristol. Originally, some people were saying it's as good as a lot of the other ones. So I was thinking, well, something like this maybe. But I listened to it a handful of times. I listened to it once more before I uploaded it. And while it's a very good gig and there's a lot of great stuff on it and some great playing, I don't think, honestly, it's as good as the other gigs. Even the A gigs. I think it's just a little bit below. Right in between B and A. So I'm going to put it at B. And the reason why I'm putting it at B is because while the band is still hungry sounding and still great, and it's still a pleasant listen in terms of the performances, there's some inconsistencies on the gig, which aren't really evident on the other ones. Freddie sounds quite a bit rougher, so he sounds more tired. He's forcing and pushing his voice harder. He's not making the notes or cracking a little bit. So vocally, it's a step down or two from the others, but he's still generally strong. So I'm not saying he sounds terrible or anything, but I think that, it's definitely noticeable on this gig that he's tired. And the band are still amazing, but the big spender and the Bamalama Bamaloo issues with the guitar and stuff kind of drag it a little bit down. So I didn't want to put it at A because I just don't think Bristol has quite the consistency as the other gigs. Now, that being said, it's still good. I mean, don't skip it. Listen to it. It's very solid and has some great stuff on it. But I'm just letting you know that it's not nearly as consistent as the other 6 gigs. And there's more mistakes. And essentially, I would take any of the other gigs over this one. But it's still good. That's why it's at B, and I'm not dragging it down here because it would make no sense to do that. And just to touch on the rankings, the best gig on each tour leg will not be necessarily an SS, and the worst or the weakest gig on the tour leg will not necessarily be down here at D or E. I'm going to be ranking these gigs kind of using an overall sort of a look, like listening to how good the band is, how tight they are, how inspired they are, if they're playing more by the numbers or on fire, improvising, spicy playing, if Freddie sounds good, if he's gutsy, daring, if he's being lazy. I'm just looking at each of these band members' performances and kind of judging off that. Also, I'm taking into account, the atmosphere and like how the whole gig is in terms of that, and just kind of looking at it. I'm trying not to be too subjective. I'm trying to mix objectivity and subjectivity together, and I'm trying to find a middle ground between the two, because if it were up to me, some gigs would be a lot higher than they would be or lower than they should be. But I want to try to find a balance where, I don't want to come off as misleading, and I just want to, keep an open debate for it, but I don't want to have it to where everything is so concrete, packed and tight, undebatable that, that's not fun. So I'm leaving some wiggle room there, but, these are my rankings right here. Oxford, Glasgow, and Manchester would be at S. London, Liverpool, and Birmingham would be at A, and Bristol is the loner at B. So yeah, I do think Bristol is the weakest gig, though it's still good. That's why it's at B. And I think these are the strongest gigs. Your Oxford, Glasgow, Manchester, and as what I think is the best out of those S's, that's a tough one because they all have the potential. Some of my favorite performances are from Glasgow, but I don't want to put my favoritism into this and kind of skewer the rankings. So, I mean, and plus, it's slightly incomplete, so I don't want to just, keep it up there with these ones and say, oh, it's definitely better than the others when it's, missing some stuff. So, in this regard, I'm going to let you guys rank these gigs as well. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, when the video gets posted, the comments are going to be down there. So I want you guys to rank these gigs. Now, you don't necessarily have to make a TierMaker video and post or anything, but just write them down in the comments. And if you agree with my rankings or disagree with them, regardless of what your viewpoints are, put your rankings in those comments, and I want to see what you guys do, because who knows, maybe Bristol's higher, maybe these gigs may be down there. I would love to see you guys rank these gigs and stuff. And if you do make a TierMaker video like this, I will watch it because I love to hear the feedback, and I love to hear other people's takes on these gigs, because I don't like hearing myself talk all the time. I want to hear other people talk, and who knows, I may learn something. So, so I will leave it at that, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys later.